13. Serial stowaway faces justice. For nearly 20 years, an American woman named Marilyn Hartman managed to defy airport security despite heightened post-9/11 measures, all for the sake of flying for free. After she started getting caught, CBS 2 investigators painstakingly traced her travels by examining records and conducting interviews. They discovered that she'd managed to travel to multiple cities around the US without purchasing a ticket, including Jacksonville, Seattle, Phoenix, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Minneapolis, and San Francisco. She also traveled internationally. In fact, Hartman first flew as a stowaway in plain sight to Copenhagen in 2002, and after that, she went to Paris. Speaking with CBS in 2021, she said that she first got caught in 2014 when she attempted to fly from San Jose to Los Angeles without paying. A judge warned Hartman not to do it again and let her go without any serious consequences. She was found incompetent to stand trial on another charge several months later, although she later contended that she was doing just fine mentally. By early 2015, Hartman had developed a reputation as a serial stowaway, but her brazen attempts to travel as an unauthorized passenger continued, and a lot of the time she still managed to pull it off. Her last success of flying as a stowaway came in 2018 when she traveled to London. Hartman told CBS that she got past security by following an employee with a blue bag, which gave off the impression that she was with the person. It worked so well that she was let through despite her picture being featured at certain airports to warn workers to look out for her. The fact that she looked like a harmless grandmother likely helped her attempts, since she didn't fit the profile of a typical stowaway. In her most telling interview to date, Hartman revealed that she wasn't just trying to save money. She said she suffers from bipolar disorder, and that whenever she snuck onto an airplane, she was experiencing a depressive episode. After being sentenced to probation twice in the US for her crimes, she was nabbed again in 2019, and the judge was far less forgiving this time. Unwilling to impose probation for a third time, the court sentenced Hartman to 3.5 years in prison for felony criminal trespass and escape from electronic monitoring. The 71-year-old was given credit for about 2.5 years of time served and will be eligible for release sometime in 2023. 12. A final attempt at freedom. As US forces began leaving Afghanistan in 2021 after a 20-year military presence in the country, desperate civilians clamored at the airport in hopes of escaping Taliban rule. One Air Force cargo plane was mobbed immediately upon landing, and its crew decided it would be more safe to take off again without unloading the cargo. At least 2 people made it into the plane's wheel well, but they dropped out of the aircraft as it took off. Harrowing cell phone footage showed 2 people falling from the sky as horrified onlookers stared in their direction. The stowaways were given 2 choices when the landing gear folded into the plane: jump or be crushed. So they jumped and they died as a result. But the tragedy wasn't as cut and dry as it seemed. The bodies of the 2 brothers landed on a rooftop at the same time, but the video of the 2 people falling shows one plummeting toward the earth before the other, suggesting that there may have been a third stowaway. And there were human remains found in the plane's wheel well when it landed, indicating that there were even more people trying to escape in the landing gear. One of the victims, a young man named Zaki Anwari, had called his family shortly before falling out of the plane. He told his brother and mother he was going to America, and they begged him to return home. Zaki was too young to have experienced the Taliban's past rule, but the stories he heard and read on social media were enough to prompt his desperate attempt to escape. Another stowaway was a 24-year-old newlywed dentist named Fida Mohammed, who had a thriving new practice in Kabul. But his fear of losing everything when the city fell to the Taliban got the better of him in the end. There were also 2 brothers, Riza and Kabir, who died in the incident. Riza was identified as one of the individuals seen falling from the aircraft. To this day, it's unclear how many stowaways died trying to escape Afghanistan on that plane. 11. Stowaways hop a ride on ship's rudder. An oil tanker called the Alathini 2 departed from Lagos, Nigeria in November 2022, with the crew unaware that the ship had taken on 3 unauthorized male passengers. The men were spotted on the vessel's rudder 11 days later when the Alathini 2 arrived in Spain's Canary Islands. They'd somehow managed to survive the perilous 3,000-mile journey perched on the thin metal section of the rudder that sits above the water, fully exposed to the elements. A Spanish Coast Guard vessel picked the men up and took them ashore at Las Palmas in Gran Canaria for medical checks. Because stowaways are typically the responsibility of a ship's captain, the travelers were put back on the vessel after undergoing any treatment they needed. Sofia Hernandez, a representative for the United Nations Refugee Agency UNHCR, told the Washington Post that it's rare but not unheard of for migrants to stow away on commercial ships. In a similar instance of refugees surviving a ride on a ship's rudder, a teenager from Nigeria named Prince traveled to the Canary Islands with a group of older men in the rudder compartment of a ship called the Ocean Princess 1 in 2020. The voyage took 2 weeks and was miserable, according to Prince, who told El Pai that he and the other travelers had to share a cold, cramped apartment with only enough room for them to sleep in shifts. He said they argued a lot, and when they ran out of food, desperation set in quickly. The stowaways banged on the ship's hull with a hammer, hoping the crew would hear them and come to their aid, but nobody did. Luckily, Prince survived, and he was welcomed on shore in the Canary Islands. 10. An accidental stowaway. A young man named Fahim was playing hide-and-seek with some friends in Chittagong, Bangladesh in early 2023 when he crawled into a shipping container and fell asleep. He woke up along the 2,000-mile journey across the Indian Ocean to Malaysia, but he was locked inside the container and couldn't get out. Fahim spent nearly 6 days in the dark, confined space until a port worker in Malaysia heard him banging on it from the inside. The boy was visibly exhausted and distressed and was crying for food. To make the situation even more terrifying, he didn't speak the local language. He was loaded onto a stretcher and taken to a local hospital, where he received the treatment he needed and was restored to a stable condition. At first, authorities feared that Fahim was a human trafficking victim, but after working past the language barrier, they learned that he ended up in the container during an innocent game and that no foul play was involved. Officials originally planned to send him back to Bangladesh on the ship he arrived on, but they ultimately decided to fly him home. 9. Hidden in plain sight. In early 2023, officers at Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas received a notification about a woman on an inbound Spirit Airlines flight from Los Angeles without a ticket or proper identification. Law enforcement was waiting to question her when the plane touched down. The stowaway, identified as 39-year-old Sarah Rice, told FBI agents that she had taken a bus from Colorado to Salt Lake City, Utah, where she snuck onto a Los Angeles-bound flight. She admitted that she'd attempted to sneak onto other flights in the past and that she sometimes got caught but sometimes got away with it. On a previous occasion, she had been caught trying to board a plane to Saudi Arabia. Rice's family confirmed that she has attempted to board both international and domestic flights without a ticket in the past. As a result, she was charged with misdemeanor theft and violating Federal Trade Commission rules. However, she was released from custody later that same day. 8. Creepy clandestine border crossing. In what can only be described as an unconventional method of sneaking across international borders, an Albanian teenager tried traveling to Britain in a small casket in early 2023. French border officials discovered the wooden box hidden among an array of other containers during a routine search of a van near Dunkirk. The coffin was nailed shut and only measured 3.5 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 2 feet high. And yet, the young man managed to cram himself inside. He told authorities that he'd paid £9,000 for the ride into Britain and that he got into the coffin in northern France. The teen said he was in the coffin for at least an hour before the van was stopped and searched. After explaining the situation in court, the young man was released. The driver, Romanian national Lucian Radu Rizai, claimed that he had no idea the stowaway was on board. But he admitted that he was paid £4,000 to transport the coffin without asking any questions, and as a result, he received a 6-month jail sentence. 7. Frozen stowaway free falls to Earth. A Kenya Airways flight from Nairobi was approaching its destination Heathrow in London one day in 2019 when a man fell out of the plane and landed in someone's yard, just feet from where the resident of the home was sunbathing. According to Kenya's Civil Aviation Authority, the stowaway may have been an airline or airport employee, perhaps a security guard, and that he likely had access to otherwise off-limit areas of the airport. He landed so hard when he hit the ground that his body formed a crater and smashed a cement pathway. A witness who came to see what happened after hearing the loud bang of the man hitting the ground told BBC News that the stowaway was frozen like an ice block. It's believed that he was already dead when he fell out of the plane. The London resident who was sunbathing when the stowaway landed was reportedly so traumatized that he could barely speak after it happened, and he left his home later that day to be with his family. Police found food, water, and a bag in the plane's wheel well, but no evidence to suggest who the man was. Shortly after the tragedy, officials reassured the public that they were working diligently to identify him and get to the bottom of the circumstances surrounding his decision to hide in the landing gear compartment. However, authorities still hadn't figured out who he was months afterward, and it's unclear whether they ever did. 6. Stowaway standoff. One evening in 2020, British authorities received a call for help from an oil tanker called the Nave Andromeda, which was seen driving erratically in the English Channel at around the same time the request went out. There were 7 stowaways aboard the ship who were believed to be Nigerian nationals seeking asylum in the UK, and that apparently threatened crew members who'd ordered them into a locked cabin. According to a statement from the Nave Andromeda's operator, Navios Tanker Management, the captain expressed concern for the safety of himself and his crew due to the stowaway's increasingly hostile behavior. The crew took shelter in the ship's citadel, a secure area on a vessel containing emergency equipment in case of these exact types of situations, while the captain of the ship remained on the bridge. British armed forces descended onto the ship's deck from helicopters and quickly gained control of the situation, ending a 10-hour standoff. The stowaways were subsequently taken into custody, and thankfully, the crew was unharmed. 5. Unfortunate pair flew unnoticed for days. Just days into the 2023 new year, employees found the frozen bodies of 2 stowaways on an Avianca Airlines plane in Bogota, Colombia. The horrifying discovery was made during routine maintenance. Both of the clandestine travelers were young men between the ages of 15 and 20. They had no identification documents, but one of them had currency from the Dominican Republic in his pocket, leading authorities to suspect that the men came from the country. The stowaways also had in their possession a suitcase filled with documents from the Dominican Republic. By the time their bodies were discovered, the aircraft had flown to Brazil, Santiago, Chile, and Bogota. The men were partially thawed when they were found. According to the most recent news updates, authorities were working to identify them. In a statement, Avianca Airlines clarified that its employees thoroughly inspect each plane prior to takeoff, but that airport security personnel are responsible for searching restricted areas. 4. Stowaway survives the impossible. Stowaways, who hide in unpressurized and unheated parts of an airplane, like the wheel well or the cargo hold, have been known to occasionally survive, typically in cases of short, low-altitude flights. But more often than not, stowaways succumb to the lack of oxygen and the below-freezing temperatures inside these spaces. This is why authorities were left scratching their heads when a South African man survived an 11-hour flight from Johannesburg to London in 2015. The stowaway, who went by the name Themba at the time but now calls himself Justin, undertook the harrowing journey with a friend, Carlito Vale, but he wasn't as lucky as his buddy and he passed away. He told The Guardian that the last words he remembered Vale saying were, "We made it." Justin passed out from the lack of oxygen, but had been mindful to wrap his arms around some cables to prevent him from falling out of the plane when the landing gear was deployed at the end of the flight. Vale, on the other hand, fell 1,400 feet to his death. According to Justin, the men studied different types of planes before deciding which one they would try to sneak onto. While many suspect that the pair had help, he insists that they acted completely on their own and gained access to the tarmac by climbing over a perimeter fence. He also conceded that he and Vale weren't fully aware of the danger they were putting themselves in. The next thing Justin remembered after losing consciousness was waking up on the runway in London with a shattered leg. The British government allowed him to stay in the country, and he's since built a new life for himself in Liverpool. 3. Furious father blames staff for stowaway son. A young boy told his mother that he was going to take the garbage out one day in 2013, but he failed to return to his North Minneapolis home in a timely fashion. His parents just assumed he'd gone over to a friend's house, and when he didn't come home later that evening, they figured he'd decided to stay over because it was storming outside. The couple finally began to worry the next morning and started calling around to see if anyone had seen their son. A few hours later, the boy's mum received a phone call from authorities informing her that he was in Las Vegas. Apparently, he'd taken a light rail to the airport and somehow boarded a flight unnoticed. It wasn't until after the plane took off that employees noticed the unaccompanied minor and realized he wasn't on the flight manifest. Police were waiting when the aircraft touched down in Las Vegas. By that point in his life, the young man had already established himself as a problem child. Officials who dealt with him at the airport described him as difficult, and his father admitted that the boy had stolen a refrigerated truck in downtown Minneapolis just days before he snuck onto the flight. The boy's dad seemed more exasperated than anything, telling local station WCCO that his ongoing issues with his son weren't for a lack of trying to get him help. He said he loved the youngster, but didn't know what to do because he feared getting in trouble for imposing heavier-handed discipline in the home. But the father also questioned how airport security didn't notice his son sneaking by, and it's a fair thing to wonder about. For someone to get on a plane without a ticket is a major security breach, and it means that someone is definitely not doing their job. 2. Airport worker attempts to flee. Shortly after, a Swift Airlines flight from Havana touched down in Miami one night in 2019. A man emerged from the plane's baggage cargo area. According to witnesses, someone heard movement in the hold, and another expressed their concerns that perhaps a dog was in there. The stowaway then appeared and clarified that he wasn't a dog. The man was identified as a 26-year-old airport worker from Cuba named Yunia Garcia Duarte, and he failed to warn his family about his plan to secretly fly to Miami, according to his father, who spoke with reporters from news channel WTVJ. Duarte garnered sympathy from some fellow Cubans, including Avilio Pumarievo, who told CBS that he came to the US from Cuba in 1961 and that he understood the stowaways' desperation. But federal authorities felt differently, and while Cuban refugees are often allowed into America, stowaways are an exception. A US Customs and Border Control spokesperson said that Duarte had violated federal law and would be processed accordingly. Consequently, he was denied entry into the country and was sent back to Cuba. 1. Teen travels to Hawaii. Authorities were baffled when a teenage boy emerged from the wheel well of a passenger jet shortly after it touched down in Hawaii in 2014. The young man was found wandering the runway at Kaului Airport in Maui in a dazed and confused state. He'd somehow survived a 5-hour flight from San Jose, California in the airplane's landing gear compartment. During the flight, the plane traveled at altitudes as high as 38,000 feet. Temperatures in the wheel well could have easily hit 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and oxygen levels would have been too low for almost any human to survive. Some described the boy's survival as miraculous. Trauma surgeon Dr. Kenneth Stahl attributed it to dumb luck mostly, telling CNN that the stowaway was likely in a state of suspended animation. He also attributed the teen's survival to his young age, noting that no adult brain would have survived that. But the youngster may have suffered some lasting health effects from the experience, according to Stahl, who said that he more likely than not incurred permanent brain damage. This could come with neurological problems, memory issues, or a lowered IQ. In addition to the teen's unlikely survival of the flight conditions, it was also surprising that he managed to position himself in a way where he avoided being crushed by the landing gear. While it's certainly possible to do so, it's also somewhat of a guessing game to be in the right spot, and the amount of space is limited. The stowaway told authorities that he ran away from home and climbed over a perimeter fence before running onto the plane, bringing only a comb with him. While the young man was cleared of any serious criminal suspicion by the FBI, his ability to sneak onto the plane unnoticed raised major security concerns about operations at US airports. Would you rather have your luggage get lost while en route to what was supposed to be a dream vacation, or spend most of a week-long cruise confined to your cabin for safety reasons due to a group of aggressive stowaways wreaking havoc aboard the ship? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.